Hey guys, we're back. All new, all exciting episode of Boba Joe.
Were you able to keep up with my really fast frame rate?
Yes, your kung fu skills are unparalleled, Mark.
Yeah, Johnny actually had to slow the footage down to catch my moves there.
They were lightning fast. So we're back for technically part 2, but you can watch them out of order. It doesn't really matter. It's more talking about Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat, the sequel.
Yeah, the sequel. And the first episode went down fairly well, but for most people, like people our age, but there was a particular core demographic that Mortal Kombat wasn't popular with. So some of the concerned mothers in America did write me some handwritten letters, and I'd like to take their concerns seriously. They didn't really object to any of the violence or the blood in the first part of our presentation, but they did object to some of my terrible, terrible meme-style jokes. So for the record in this week, there will be no Mortal Wombat jokes. You won't be seeing those. There'll be no jokes about Johnny Cage and the Examiner, or a boy who was 4 shipped 12,000 miles in a cardboard box, or the parrot quoting passages from the Holy Bible. That you will not see. I promise you will not see those in this week's presentation. There will be no toilet humor related to Mortal Kombat in any way in this presentation. And there's one other fellow who's also written into me and said, look, we just have to stop these kind of jokes altogether because they're just entirely silly and inappropriate. So I promise you will not see anything like that in this episode whatsoever.
Yeah, and I'd also like to assure our network and our advertisers that we're not going to go overboard with gratuitous gore and violence. Well, we're not, but the developers of Mortal Kombat 2 are. So it's not our fault. Whatever you see today, that's on them, not on us.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. There will be no gratuitous violence, blood, gore, or anything like that in this presentation to make sure that every audience member is happy and safe and good and well.
Keep your kids out of the room. But yeah, we're here. We're talking about the sequel to Mortal Kombat. But is this the first time we've actually done a sequel to a topic we've actually covered? So it's a double sequel here,
Double sequel, double the combat, double the things I said that wouldn't be in this episode. But
it's Mortal Kombat squared.
So we're talking about Mortal Kombat 2, the arcade game. We'll probably touch on the home versions a little bit as well. Tie-in media. They did comics. They did animations. They did live-action stage show and other nonsense. And in the later part of this episode, we'll be talking about the first Mortal Kombat movie from Paul W.S. Anderson. And I'm thinking, after the fact, I'll go back in and add a time code and description. So if anyone wants to be able to skip to that part of it, they can. So we'll get on to the beginning of our presentation here. But first, you must prepare yourself for Mortal Kombat.
Get ready.
Get ready. So I'll just warn people, this is the most text we're going to see here. It's mostly images we're going to talk about and have a good conversation. It's not going to be a big text everything, because Mortal Kombat 2, there's so much goddamn media and documentaries and retrospectives. There's so much stuff out there that, like, if you throw a rock, you're going to hit something about Mortal Kombat 2 out there. But just for the record, Mortal Kombat 2 was made in 1993 by Midway Games as a follow-up to the first arcade game, which was very popular and successful. Originally, they were not going to make a sequel. They were going to go on to make an entirely unrelated arcade game, nothing specific, but this is from the mouths of babes, the guys who worked in Midway back then. That was the modus operandi. You made a game, went out to market, then you made another one and another one. That was the job, and you made stuff that, it's a creative thing, but that was the job. You didn't always make sequels. Sequels were not a common or guaranteed thing. It was one of the higher ups of the company who actually said, no, forget going and making some other entirely original thing. Mortal Kombat's going gangbusters in the arcade and home conversions. Go and make a sequel to this game. So they actually got directed by one of the higher ups to make it because it was so successful, which none of them objected. They were happy to do it. So Mortal Kombat 2 is an arcade fighting game that followed the huge success of the first game and its console conversions. MK2 is notable for upping the fidelity of the digitization process, adding more characters with a K, I'll put in there for fun, more blood, more fatalities, more moves, refined animation, more stages, backgrounds, and lore. The game was well received in the arcades and the games press. And I do remember reading EGM GamePro back then. Like, every magazine was raving about it, calling it a Street Fighter killer and the sort of thing. Players could choose from a roster of 12 playable characters. More characters were intended to be included, but instead palette swap characters such as the male and female ninjas fill out the character roster due to memory limitations. And ironically, the ninjas would go on to become such amazingly popular characters in this series anyway.
Definitely my favorites.
Mm-hmm. Who's your favorite ninja?
My favorite ninja is Reptile. And
No,
Reptile
incorrect.
was like
Scorpion.
my
Scorpion. No, well, I'll have to delete and remove that audio and I'll dub over some kind of voice saying Scorpion where Mark said Reptile.
Especially for Mortal Kombat 2, Reptile is like, he was always like my go-to character. I just
He
kind of
did cool
got used to
combos
him
with
pretty
like that
quickly.
force ball thing. You could juggle them that. And
Not to get too ahead of ourselves, but
yeah,
when you depended so much on the force ball like I did, and then when you get to the bosses, it doesn't work on. All of a sudden, the
no,
game gets a lot
that's right. That
harder.
doesn't work. Yeah, I love his fatalities too, where he does the head snack thing, where he eats your head, and then some of the later games, like the first version of Mortal Kombat 4 in the arcade, he would like vomit acid onto your head and it would melt all the skin. So it was just this bloody skull, and then the camera would zoom in on it. And yeah, one he would vomit acid on you, and then the other one he would jump on you and just he would full on grapple onto you and then eat your face and go. It was most of
Awesome.
the Mortal Kombat 4 fatalities were fairly shit, but there was 2 or 3 standout ones, and the reptile ones were really good.
Yeah, it was cool because he for this game he's got his own obviously unique move set and fatalities and stuff.
Yes,
Where when
yeah,
he's the hidden character in the first game, he's just like
just a
a
palette swap.
Scorpion clone. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so it's cool. He got his own distinct personality and move set and backstory. But look, I love Sub-Zero and Scorpion as well. I love all the ninjas.
I like all kinds of ninja rivalries, whether it's G.I. Joe or Mortal Kombat or Michael Dudikoff, any kind of ninja rivalry company. Yeah.
Turtles.
Turtles. Oh, yeah, Turtles. They're technically ninjas, but you forget because they're more established as their own unique characters. They're not just, generic ninjas.
Some people call them
Yeah.
heroes, so that gets confusing.
Oh, no, they're villains, Mark. They're Teenage Mutant Villain Heroes. That's what I call them. So we're going to come. This is our sort of intro. We're going to cover a bit of Mortal Kombat media. like my old media studies teacher used to say. Funnily enough, because it was media studies class, it's not, we talk about media for some reason. We're going to cover a bit of tie-in combat crap to sum it up in a sentence, and then we'll come back to the actual game itself. So we had Mortal Kombat: The Journey Begins in 1995, a direct market animation video that even people who enjoyed Mortal Kombat would see in the rental aisle and ignore and go home and rent something else, like maybe a Jackie Chan movie or a Night of the Living Dead. Why did you
Oh yeah,
ignore this movie, Mark? Was it not the best entertainment you could get for your combat dollar?
definitely not. And like at this point in my life, if I was in the video shop and if I was in the mood for watching anything animated to do with a video game, it would have been Street Fighter 2, the animated movie, which was an excellent
Oh, that was a
video and
kick-ass movie.
great fun to rent. But with this video,
Anime, not the
no,
live action one.
yeah, not the live action one. But that's a different episode. That's an episode for another time. But no, with this
Both were
video,
more entertaining than this feature.
yeah, and like like as Johnny mentioned, like I ignored this. I actually have not watched this piece of media because I was one of those people who picked it up in the video shop, looked at the back of the box like we can see here on this slide, saw what the still imagery looked like, and just thought this looks trash, and put it back on the shelf again. So I'm assuming you've watched it though, right?
I watched it, and I watched it back then around 95 or 96, and I don't think I rented it. I'm pretty sure a friend must have rented it when he was bored one day, and we watched it at his house. And this is the same friend who kind of introduced me to like Kiss and the Beatles and Friday the 13th and wrestling in general, because that was the things he was into. And I think he must have rented this when we were really bored, and we watched it, and we laughed at how awful it was. And like, to put it in context, it's early 3D animation, but even by PC CD-ROM standards, even by early Beast Wars by Mainframe, and they also did the reboot cartoon, those were fluid animation for early 3D. This was just a fairly garbage production, like that was put out. I do not know what studio animated it, but it looks awful. There has 3D segments, then it goes to 2D, then back to 3D, then back to 2D. The 2D is passable, but it's like watching a slideshow of the official comic that you can get when you're sent into the arcade game to get the comic. It used that sort of art for the models. The 3D bits were just horrible. They would have been better off just making it a purely 2D thing, even at a lower um, budget and animation. But it was just very much of the era where early 3D stuff, for people that grew up with it and played games and watched animations, you've seen the first Toy Story, you've seen Beast Wars, you've seen other stuff there. You know what to expect. But this was just far below the lowest common denominator, even of the year when it was released, and other comparable products.
It's clearly like
So
just a marketing tool. Like even just looking at the
yeah,
cover, like
absolutely.
everything is just like look here, like hidden codes for Mortal Kombat 3, and a coupon
It's the
book with
first dog shit
$75,
tie-in.
and yeah, yeah, it's just like just please pick up this video. Look, we'll give you all this free stuff and special offers if you buy this.
And all the controversy around Mortal Kombat and the violence and whatnot, like your American developers were jealous of Japanese video game companies and made fantastic animations in their games thanks to decades of anime and all sorts of in-house artists that they could get for virtually no pay. Um, when they made Mortal Kombat, they were trying to see how can we compete, how can we go into this market. American developers didn't have the know-how, the technical know-how to really make great fighting games back then. It took them a long time to catch up to what Japanese developers have been doing. And I doubt anyone involved with Mortal Kombat would have been proud of this video animation thing. So it's really a curio, something you can look back and kind of just have a laugh at now. But I mean, probably the cover on it is better than the entire feature itself. Probably the
was
most
it even
redeeming feature.
was it even like a full length movie?
Oh,
It
it's not
strikes
very.
me as the type of
It's
thing
like
that
a
you might get
DC
maybe like,
early DC animated thing. Like I think it's about 40 minutes or something like that, or
yeah,
40 minutes,
I was
50
thinking
minutes.
that, yeah, you're not going to get like an hour and 20 minutes
No, so
of
that's why old
significant story.
Kentaro is stomping on the VHS version of the Mortal Kombat animated on the left there. And moving on from one dog shit product to another, we had Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm, 1996, a syndicated TV series, which I remember actually watching when I was still in high school back in New Zealand. And the costumes, notably, are all out of Mortal Kombat 3, which we're not particularly talking about this talk, but this we're covering the main tie-in media that was all getting cranked out in this era. That show was fairly awful. The animation was not good. The voices were not great. The voice direction was not great. In the same era, we had Mortal Kombat Conquest in 1998, which was a live action TV series, which I did not see any of back then, but people looking back at it or have watched it, that show actually has some fans, and it's a very Power Rangers quality level of show, for better or worse. I'm not judging it either way, but that one actually has its fans and bases most of its lore and costumes out of the first two games in the series and the live action movie in a weird combination, but it also invents its other original characters. So, in a way, it's probably one of the better pieces of early Mortal Kombat media tie-ins. It's not completely terrible, but it's definitely B grade stuff. So, I've got an extra slide here about this animated show, which was a fairly horrible show, but I will say its one redeeming feature is its voice cast. And you might say, well, you just said a moment ago the voices were fairly terrible in it. And they are, they're pretty fucking awful. The voice cast are excellent and probably did the best they could. The voice direction, however, was not good. Unlike Batman Animated, where you had fantastic voice direction, that's really the key thing in your animation for a TV. If you haven't got good voice direction, then you're going to end up with just boring, dry reads of stuff. But the actors in this, man, like Luke Perry, old 90210 Dylan, Clancy Brown, been in loads of stuff, Awesome Carnivale, Ron Perlman / Hellboy / what's his name, Beast back in the 80s. The what I can't remember what the hell that show was. Where he's Vincent, the Beauty and the something Beast.
Yeah. I know I'm drawing a blank, but I know what you're talking about.
But he was good in that show, and he had obviously got used to prosthetics back then, decades before Hellboy.
Yeah, it is a really good cast, but like you were saying, voice direction was probably poor. Also, the dialogue in the show was pretty awful.
Oh,
So like you couldn't really,
Kombat,
you could have like
Kombat.
Laurence Olivier reading out the stuff, and it would still sound terrible.
Yeah, really, really wooden, very much. I don't know the production history of this show, but I would assume they were all done in isolation in the booth going, read this line, read this line. There's nothing like watching the old Transformers. We're in the same room and bouncing off each other and doing lines like a live action play sort of thing. It was very wooden, but excellent voice cast. Like there's no clunkers as far as the actual talent involved. And they must have paid pennies on the dollar to get these people back then who were in career lulls coming off of different shows and things where they would have gotten very cheap. And it was long before, Clancy Brown went on to other shows and Ron Perlman went on to other stuff like your Sons of Anarchy and Hellboy. Cree Summer, I didn't know that name, but I looked up. I thought, what else has she been? I might know. Drawn Together, that animated show about where it's like a Big Brother style thing with all cartoon characters living in the house. I think she was. I don't quote me. I think she was the Foxy Brown character. I'm not sure, but like that show was brilliant. Like hilarious comedic show. But we'll go on to the next slide here. Okay, so also in the 90s, they had Mortal Kombat, the live tour in 1996. I never saw this. I saw the old Ninja Turtles live action tour back in the early 90s. I don't know if this show went outside of America If it did, if someone knows, feel free to let us know, post a comment. 'Cause I have no idea. I've seen some clips on YouTube, but I don't know a heck of a lot about this other than that it existed. And the most interesting trivia is that Kerry Hoskins, who played Sonya in Mortal Kombat 3, as opposed to Elizabeth Malecki, who was Mortal Kombat 1, she was in the live action show and then went on to be in the Mortal Kombat 3 arcade game as well, which I thought was just some cool combat trivia.
Yeah, and she got a double payday out of it then, you know.
Yeah.
She's happy to have had a bit of Mortal Kombat in her life. I bet you this show, well, maybe it did tour outside of the States, but I have a gut feeling to say it probably wasn't the easiest thing to market, because you want to obviously get kids in the
Violence for
door, but
children,
you've
Mark.
got to yeah, but you got a show called Mortal Kombat. I'm sure there was like
Yeah.
quite a few raised eyebrows among those type of parents who wouldn't be down for that type of thing, and probably didn't want to bring little Jimmy or little Timmy or whoever
Yeah.
to go see
Should have called it Mortal Kombat
choreographed
Swan Lake.
combat. It's probably every modern wrestling match I hear is based on the Mortal Kombat live tour.
I, I will say, like the live action show, you can see some clips of on YouTube, which I watched this week as sort of background research for this talk, and and it's fairly horrible. The comments, there's people who posted comments saying, "I saw this when I was 10 or 12, and even as a 10 or 12-year-old, I thought it was absolutely awful." So it was.
Is
You
it
wouldn't say it was a good production, but I will say that the actual martial artists slash dancers do the best they can with what they have. Like they do a good job as far as actually trying to put on a show.
is there actually like simulated blood or anything, or is it kind of
I don't
clean?
think
Is
there's
it
any
more like
blood. It's pretty much like watching a ballet. They're just dancing around doing kung fu kicks and punches, but not. It's like watching people sparring in taekwondo. They're just going, psh, psh, but not really touching each other, sort of thing. So they do have
yeah,
skill. They've got some martial arts skills, but it's the overall production, like the costumes and the sound and the lighting. It's like going to some high school bloody musical production or something. It's not good quality. But I did love finding some of the images though. Finding the Kerry Hoskins image was from her own archive Facebook image, and these old ads slash flyers here for $2 off merchandise at the Mortal Kombat Live tour. So before you get there, you know you're going to get some dodgy merchandise, like this ten
you're
dollar
going to get
T-shirt.
your maybe a
It's
hat.
got the
You might get a Mortal Kombat foam finger.
Yeah, it might be a foam figure. I'm not sure at this, but I think there were Mortal Kombat hats at some point because I saw that. And actually, there was a Mortal Kombat watch it was off the side here. It's covered up by the Sonya picture. And then you've got that dodgy T-shirt there where someone's taken some really nice uh, original artwork from the comics, not the Malibu, but the original comics that they did. We sent into the arcade game to get them, and they've just cropped it and put it into like a Simon Says circle. It looks terrible. Like they've ruined some really nice artwork and just completely stuffed that up for that T-shirt. I would
Yeah,
not pay
really
$10 for
dodgy
that even now.
merchandise. No, not a chance.
So moving along, this is showing off just some of the actors slash dancers slash martial artists who are in the live action stage show. And like the Sub-Zero looks reasonable, Liu Kang, the Sonya, even Sindel. But when I saw the Jax guy, I'm like, what's going on? He's wearing like his mum's tights or something on his shoulders.
Yeah, it's he
Meant
looks a
to be
bit
the
weird.
metal arms.
I imagine it was a lot of fun though to be part of something like that,
Yeah.
touring around,
Yeah.
and
Well, you,
you know,
you
and
can
it
see
probably
they're
is a
all
little bit like it probably is a little bit like it being on a wrestling show or something
yeah.
like that, because you're
Well,
going in,
they're all
you're performing the
pretty
same
fighting
fight
fit at
every night.
least.
Yeah,
You can see they're definitely
I'd say it was
athletes.
fun.
Like they are performers. Yeah. But they're in some very B grade material. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
there's
what
definite
was the
Halloween costume vibes.
yeah, very much. Like the funny thing is, this was the live action stage show, and the best they could come up with then, But you can go online now and look on like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. There's a decade worth of cosplayers who have made every version of every costume, of every bloody Mortal Kombat that's a million times better than anything you're looking at on these images here. And speaking of which, there was a wrestler, almost slash cosplayer in WCW, and what character did they? Some of the characters they ripped off from the Mortal Kombat era.
Yeah, well, most obvious one would be Glacier, who was a complete rip-off of
Sub-Zero.
Sub-Zero. Now, in fairness to Glacier, he actually could do some martial arts and had a very unique entrance with a lot of dry ice and
He could
blue
actually
lights.
freeze you to death.
Yeah, unfortunately, once the bell rang, you realized he was just a normal man doing a wrestling match dressed as Sub-Zero. And yeah, they had a few other guys like Mortis and Wrath. They were just clearly supposed to be like rip-offs of Mortal Kombat characters. So that was
Yeah,
WCW in 95, 96, getting in on the act and trying to get some easy popularity among the youngsters who like their video
yeah.
games and Mortal Kombat.
They'd moved on from RoboCop, and they were going, "Let's go Sub-Zero."
One time.
Okay, so in Mortal Kombat 2, the actual back to the game rather than the cosplayer slash martial artist, we had 12 playable characters, and you also had some secret characters you could fight but not choose to play as. On the left there, we've got some of the actors slash martial artists who dressed up for the game, and those images got chucked around a lot back in old like GamePro, EGM, computer and video games magazines in the 90s, which I used to own a lot of those magazines. I've still got a few now, actually. And I love seeing those images back then. Now you can go online and find like high resolution images of just about anything from like design, concept, artwork, all sorts. It's a real treat to be able to actually see what was in the game and what they intended. They had the costumes are very spandexy. You think you're Spider-Man. They're more. There's no polite way to say it. They hug up very tight in the crotch and under the armpits, and they did it on purpose. In the first game, they had to waste a lot of time. They digitized these characters with their basic recorded camera, and you're going in with like MS Paint level technology and rubbing around the edges, removing the backgrounds. So for number 2, they had your tightest spandex outfits to make it easier for them in post-production to actually remove the backgrounds from the green screen slash blue screen. And apparently during the production, they moved into a different phase that was, I forget the exact wording, but they had a very slow process in the start. But by the time they got later on to the process of making the game, they'd sped up where they could do similar to like your motion capture, where it was almost kind of like real time, where they're capturing it and kind of like showing it on the screen and then going into the rendering process much faster.
Yeah, they had a big budget increase as well because we mentioned
Yeah,
in
yeah,
our
definitely.
first part they went from capturing their footage using a little handheld home camera to actually having a proper TV slash movie production 20 grand
It was
camera
about
now to capture.
$20,000 camera for the second one.
Yeah, big deal. It's really they really pumped the budget up and put the money in for the
And
sequel.
it
And
does show
it
in the
shows
visual
oh
fidelity.
it definitely shows even looking at some of those stills there. And I know we mentioned in the first part in our last video about how realistic the first game looked compared to other games, but when you compare Mortal Kombat with its sequel, Mortal Kombat 2. Like Mortal Kombat 2 looks so much better. Like everything is
It was
just
only 1
tighter,
year
more
later.
realistic. Yeah, crazy. It's crazy. It's that soon after the first game.
They definitely went more realistic as far as like had more expensive cameras. They'd become more effective at the whole process of capturing and then rendering and moving the backgrounds of the characters from the blue screen, putting them onto the video game background, showing the animations. What they also did is well, the game's more realistic, particularly if you look at, say, Jax or Liu Kang. They added a lot of accents on the muscles, and it reminds me of old fantasy art, like your Boris and Julie. It's the lighting or camera. They put little polishes on the muscles to really show off all the muscles on the performers. But what they also did is they really cranked up the color palette, which you can see Scorpion, Reptile, Raiden, Sub Zero, Kentaro, and the backgrounds, which makes it look not so much cartoonish, but it has what you'd call a high contrast palette style that really differentiated it from the first game, where the first game was coming out of that into the Dragon era and the Kickboxer, where it's more the classical martial arts. This is going more into fantasy and horror and science fiction territory, as far as like we've got more backgrounds, more diverse characters in the cast, and more lore and world building going on.
Yeah, it's and I suppose that makes sense as well because I suppose the location this game is set in kind of like the Outworld realm as opposed to like
World,
Earth realm. So you're seeing a lot
excellent.
more just these crazy levels and kind of environments that you end up fighting in. It just seems a lot kind of more imaginative than some of the places you would have fought in the first game. They definitely really went
Yeah,
for the all in on the fantasy and the sci-fi aspect of things.
yeah, they definitely did. And the first game, like, they had specific influences, but they were working within a certain budget, working within certain technological limitations and memory. When they got to the second game, technology had moved along, bigger budget. They were able to really sort of let loose and put in ideas that they might have liked to put into the first game, and that some of which made it into the official first and second comic. There's quite a lot of stuff in there from from an art design and comic level. They're able to expand on into this game, like your backgrounds. And I think of, like, you had like your extra stage fatalities, and you had the forest of living trees that would like growl at you, and there was rumors about being able to make a stage fatality and make the trees eat you, which apparently put into some later game. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard it's possible in some later game.
Yeah, no, I think it has actually been added as a feature in the later games, the tree fatality or like
I
the
just haven't
trees
played
doing
them, that's
something.
why I don't know.
Yeah. I was looking.
Otherwise,
I was just enjoying this slide here, looking at the Baraka pictures. Is that
yeah,
in one of the pictures there where you see the big kind of fat Baraka face? Is that the original mask they were going to use before they switched it to the more Nosferatu looking Baraka? I wonder because that kind of Baraka head looks really big and jaws like compared to the one that
looks like a
they.
pumpkin head.
Yeah, yeah, it's
I'm not
swollen.
sure if it's the same or different, or if it's just before they've painted it, because it looks like it's probably. I imagine it's probably latex or something like that that is stretched over his head. Like,
Could
you
have been
got
one
Richard
maybe that they
Divisio, who was
used.
Kano in Mortal Kombat 1 and 3, is also Baraka. But yeah, I don't know about the pumpkin slash Green Goblin head on the middle left there. If it's the prototype or if it's before they've painted it and stretched over his head. Like in the images, it looks fairly dodgy, but they've really, when they've come to digitizing it in the game and then lighting it and then doing the touch up afterwards with the same technology he's using for the muscle touch ups, they've really got the best look for his face, which looks awesome in the game. But as a mask, it just kind of looks like a basic Halloween costume mask now. Or to
Yeah.
us looking
Well,
back,
you
it
know,
does. But back then,
it is supposed to be apparently like from what I was reading, it is
yeah,
actually originally a Nosferatu mask was like the
ah,
base of
it
the
makes
mask. So
sense
that's
because he's got
it
that
makes the even
proportions.
the ears and everything like
Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
the shape, the length of the head. And then I think they added extra teeth and things like that just to differentiate
Yeah,
it
they
a bit
said
so
the
it wasn't
teeth, they
immediately
got some
obvious.
kind of basic prop thing and just flipped it upside down and used two of them for the teeth.
Yeah.
I'd
Looks
never
great
seen it
though.
in that way as far as the Nosferatu. As soon as you mentioned, I'm like, yeah, he's got the narrow head, the pointy ears, and like, yep, Nosferatu all the way.
See Raiden and is that it's the same woman who plays Melina and Katana, is that right?
Indeed,
And probably
just like
Jade.
with the well, if you watch the actual capture videos, which there's a number of them on YouTube, which are a real treat to watch, where it's got actual. I mean, it's this footage from back then that's been sort of archived, and it's been in a couple of documentaries. So it's been through who knows how many hands end up on people's like game fan YouTube videos now. But your ninjas, male and female, they mostly filmed in red, and then they used After touch up to colorize them to whatever colors they actually were. Because going back to your green screen, blue screen, the red had the highest contrast, or red maroon had the highest contrast. That's also why Raiden in the middle was in red there. Had the best contrast on the blue screen, that they will then use the computers to change to whatever the color they needed to. And the other thing is that they turned Katana into Melina and into Jade, the secret character, just by changing the colors and whatever animations they needed to do. But and the same with the ninjas, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Reptile. It's all the same guy, and they just changed the colors because that was the way. While they had a bigger budget, it was bigger budget, but still finite. And more important than that is they were working with certain memory limitations within, like, your chipset for the arcade game and the home versions. They had to make it work within that, and that's part of the reason why they kind of cut the roster down from the original roster and did more palette swaps to make it work within that limited technology at the time.
Yeah, you work with what you got, and it did work as well, obviously, as a method. Yeah, Caitlin Zameyer, is that the way you pronounce her name?
I have no
Beautiful,
idea.
beautiful looking woman. Yeah, she was gorgeous,
Either
definitely. I'm sure she
Caitlin
still
or
is.
Catalan, I don't know. Zamia. She's certainly very beautiful and did an excellent job being in the game. I can say that.
Yeah. She will live on in our
So,
memories forever.
yeah. And they did an awesome job kind of expanding the roster of the characters in this game, and the sort of storylines and lore. The whole setup for the game is Shang Tsung. He done fucked up. He failed in Mortal Kombat 1. He failed to get the 10th win and open a portal for Outworld to come and invade the Earth and take over, which is in a lot of the movies and other games. So Shao Kahn brings him back to Outworld. He's restored his youth, which is why he's younger in this version. And there's a new tournament, but it's Shao Kahn has the home court advantage, where the next tournament is in Outworld. So characters are forced to come there, and there's a whole lot of machinations going on behind the scenes, like Princess Katana, as you see in the live action movie, and we'll talk about later. Is originally from Outworld before Shao Kahn has invaded there and made a complete mess of the place. She's part of the royal family. Melina, who is like an evil sister, who's like an imperfect clone of her. You got Kentaro as the new champion because Goro is like defeated or not around from the. I think it's the Shokan race. I'll probably mangle up. In like the comics and stuff, they get on about the whole race that Kentaro and Goro are from. But I really like these characters, and these images here are from some of the comics they did back then, so that's why they're done in comic style art and not the video game renders.
Yeah, Kentaro, he's like Goro's cousin, I think. Is that the story? They're like cousins.
I have no idea,
Yeah,
but I'll
I
go
could
with
be
it.
totally wrong there. Yeah, I probably read that in like a magazine in the 90s, and then that just became
I'm
my
sure I read the
official.
same thing, but they always do like retroactive lore of Mortal Kombat, and they've changed things. It's like reading Marvel DC comics. They've changed things so many times. It's like I can't keep up with it. The amount of times they've retconned it. Like they've
Yeah,
retconned Sub-Zero and Scorpion from the first one a few times about exactly who they were and why they fought and who was the good guy and who was the bad guy. I'm like, I don't care. As long as it's funny and entertaining, I don't care. Do as many bloody retcons as you want. So just some images here from the actual arcade game of the second one. Up the top left from the track screen, you had Shang Tsung's new plan is to lure his enemies to compete in the Outworld. where they will meet certain death by Shao Kahn himself. It says it's Shang Tsung's plan, but I mean, really, it's Shao Kahn's plan. Shang Tsung's just the lackey who's along for the ride. And their track screen and demos were pretty cool because they showed off a whole bunch of character profiles, story stuff. You saw a heap of different character battles and new characters, old characters. It definitely got you excited to want to go up and put your coins in and actually play the game.
Yeah, the opening is probably one of the best video game intros of all time. I'd encourage
For
anybody
sure.
if you're kind of not
Street
really
Fighter had that
familiar
guy
with
going,
it.
and that was it.
Yeah. No, the Mortal Kombat 2 opening blows the Street Fighter 2 opening out of the water. I'd encourage anybody if you haven't watched or if you haven't played the arcade version of Mortal Kombat 2, I'd advise you to go on to YouTube and even just look up the arcade intro because it's just a really, really savage intro. And definitely as a kid, I remember going to the airport with my parents. We were like picking up my brother, and there was arcade machines there, and Mortal Kombat 2 was there. I didn't have any coins to play it, but I was just watching the loop of the intro and then the different kind of demo fights. But that arcade intro, it really just gets you fired up and really dying to play the game, which I wouldn't get to play until I got it on I wouldn't get to play it properly until I actually owned it on a console like a year or so later on Sega. But at the time, I was
Yeah,
really,
same.
really pumped. I love looking at that arcade intro. And the music is fantastic as well. I'll still often just throw it on randomly just to listen to the music. It's a fantastic intro.
Yeah, they did an awesome job expanding the backgrounds, by which I mean these stages they're in. Like you've got the acid pit or Deadpool there, you've got the outward forest, you've got the monastery with the monks up on the tower, you've got the pit 2. They added new stage fatalities. You've got on the left there Jax Kantara and Khan's arena, and off the side of that you had old Kano and Sonya were prisoners from the first game, which apparently in the old arcade information showing what characters have been played the most and least, they reckon that Kano and Sonya had been chosen the least in the arcade, and that's why they weren't in number 2 and they swapped out other characters. But apparently that was only true for certain regions and areas, and other areas people had used a lot of those characters. It's
Yeah, I
fun
was
learning
wondering
little
about that
trivia.
because I had read the same piece as well, and it did get me wondering how accurate it was because I know people who would have been quite fond of playing as both
Mhm.
Kano and Sonya. So and
It was
they're
region specific.
yeah, it must have been region specific because they're even
Mm.
within the lore, they're very front and center as
Yeah.
characters. So
Well, they're
you'd
back in a
imagine
big
that
way
they
in
were
number
popular.
3.
Yeah,
And I think it worked
big
to their
time.
advantage not being a number 2, because the number 3, like they've got expanded roster and different fatalities, and like Kano on number 3 is pretty awesome. We've got cool combos in it.
Some of these stages though look great. The outworld setting just really makes the game pop. It's just
Yeah.
so otherworldly, which is exactly what it's supposed to be. But it really, like I was saying, it just seems so much more exotic and outlandish than the setting of the first
Hmm.
game.
Yeah, they really went to town with that sort of stuff. They went like full bloody, Lord of the Rings or whatever, and just went beyond being a pure martial arts to almost to having all kinds of fantasy and it's a different dimension slash planet, whatever. So you can do whatever the hell they want to do with it and just run wild. Like I like in that Pit 2 background there where it's got Baraka uppercutting Johnny Cage. You've got the guy that's on fire and then the shirtless martial arts dude, and it's like a palette swap of Liu Kang. And then that fire guy, there was rumors that you could fight that guy in the game, and he later became a character in the later Mortal Kombat games. Where I'm not sure exactly which one it is. There's a guy's on fire, and then the rock guy, and I haven't played the later ones. There's a Tremor, and there's some other dude, but there's the lore stuff from the rumors from back then, and then there's what they actually put into later games. But a lot of the cool rumors and stuff that started off in 1, 2, and 3 became real characters or backgrounds or background lore in later games, which is one of the fun things of the series that they take those ideas and just run with them and chuck them in there.
Yeah, it's like we said on the last episode. It's like it's on the ground research of what your fans are actually talking about and wondering about, and then taking that and incorporating it into the actual game, which I'll always give them credit for doing. It's like really getting into the kind of community aspect of gaming
It
when
is.
you're
It is.
listening on the ground like that. So I'll always appreciate them for doing things like that.
So we've got some Jax up here, and what does Jax like to get up to when he's not destroying people?
I say he's hitting the gym a lot.
Yeah,
He is
yeah, he was an
pumped.
actual bodybuilder, they said, and the actor who was in the game.
That rip your arms off fatality as well. Like, just brutal.
Yeah, I played a lot of Jax, like Scorpion. Jax are probably my favorite two characters to play in this game.
Very cool
But yeah,
character. Tough,
yeah,
tough to play against as well. If he could, if once he got his
yeah,
momentum going and you know, if you weren't used to his rhythm, he could really hammer you in 1v1s.
yeah. Like these, I mean, the Mortal Kombat games are very unbalanced in terms of pure fighting game stuff, like your Street Fighter, King of Fighters, Soul Calibur. Like your Japanese had a pedigree that were more balanced, and Mortal Kombat were kind of like experimental, so had a lot of flaws, a lot of bugs and problems. But Jax was like, if you're playing two players with skilled players, very good at the zoning. He could use your projectile. He's got an air throw. He's got that ground pound that can smash you from anywhere on the screen. Very good at zoning, and if you know how to play him well, you can really destroy your opponents.
Yeah, just close that space and dominate. He's almost a little bit like Guile from Street Fighter 2 in that
Yeah, yeah,
respect. You
yes, yes,
use your projectile to get the guy to back off or to put him in a
yeah.
position where you then can just rush in and just hammer him
Like,
essentially.
gotcha.
But yep, you dead.
But yeah, but yeah, cool character too. I like his funky pants with the black and the little stripe down the side, and then old MK3 they gave him the metal arms and purple pants, and both of them were kind of cool versions. MK2 they bumped everyone up to you had two fatalities per character. You had a friendship babality, taking the piss out of the controversy from the first games about violence and think of the children. They're just having a laugh. And you had not one, not two, but three stage fatalities. You had Pit 2, you had the crazy Spike one, where you could also pull down on both joysticks and make them fall down again, and the Deadpool slash Acid Pit, which also had another funny thing too, where sometimes as a cat they'll do that scream where they're like, ah, going to the pit, and sometimes they'd go, oh no, as they float, the skeleton floats up, just a random bit of audio they put in there. They always like putting the little humorous, strange things in the audio.
Yeah, I love the in stage fatalities. It's a really nice
Yeah.
touch and something that they
They're
would
great
just
fun.
run
I was annoyed they
with.
made them inputs rather than uppercuts like the first game. Was the only thing. I learned them all, but it
Yeah,
still annoyed me.
yeah, because you would assume that you would, especially for like the most obvious one, anyone that's involves like an uppercut going into something like or going up into the spikes, you would assume they would have just kept it as the normal uppercut
Bloody
mechanic.
uppercut.
But no, you still have to actually input the commands, unfortunately, to
Yeah,
get them.
they're fairly simple. It's shit like forward, down, forward, kick or punch. It's not hard to do, but like I did, but probably the games I played the most of, like Street Fighter 2 slash, Turbo Hyper New Challenges, and Mortal Kombat 1 and 2, and King of Fighters 98. They're probably the games where I still I remember the entire move sets from all those games, even though I haven't played them for several years. And I still remember most of the fatalities, but I don't remember the stage ones or the fatalities of friendships. But I usually remember all the fatalities because I played them so much. They're just there. If I sit down, I'll just do them automatically.
As long as you do them quick enough as well. I think as I was mentioning
Yeah,
to
the
you in our
bloody
last
timing.
episode, the my muscle memory is still kind of there, but my reactions just aren't. So sometimes I
Yeah.
kind of fuck things up that way.
Well, don't go playing any of those Mortal Kombat clones we mentioned the other one, because some of them
Oh yeah.
have terrible timing for doing their stupid poopalities and fartalities and whatever, not nudalities and all that. Tattoo assassins. Terrible timing. Or actually, one of the other ones, Primal Rage, fun game, not the best, amazing animations, but the timing to do the fucking moves and fatalities, just awful.
Yeah, if Primal Rage played as good as it looked, it would have been one of the best fighting
Oh,
games ever.
they did amazing animations in that. Just like Clay Fighter, the original Clay Fighter had these amazing renders that were like, well, it's like this, but clay, where it was all sort of digitized, but clay stuff. But when the actual game came out, they looked terrible. They couldn't do the original animations justice. But the old Mortal Kombat, we're kind of leading into the second half of our show here, but Mortal Kombat 2 had a pretty cool, um, hesitate to call it soundtrack, more of a soundscape. It's very atmospheric. You had growls of living trees, you had monks meditating and weird kind of sound effects in the background. But if you were playing your home conversion quite loud on a Saturday morning, your mum's going to be like, "What are you doing? Shut up and then turn that bloody noise down." She doesn't want to hear
Yeah,
your stupid Mortal Kombat sounds.
no, not at all,
Why
not
are
at
you
all.
punching up your brother, Mark? Just cut it out. What are you playing those video games for?
I suppose though, thankfully for all the mothers back then, we didn't have access to the same sounds as the arcade, even though it was
Yeah,
unfortunate for us
wasn't
that
as loud.
we were missing quite a few sound files on the Sega version
That's right.
compared to the arcade. It was very glitchy for the sound. I understand for the limitations of the hardware at the time, they had to strip back a lot of stuff. And the music still sounded good, but you definitely were
But the
missing a
sound
lot
effects
of the
really suffered.
yeah, the sound effects really, really suffered.
The
So
Genesis was showing
Sega,
its age doing that game.
yeah, definitely. Even the sprites look good, but just not as good as they could have looked. Like you'd
Yeah, they're
notice,
kind of washed out.
with Sega, they made a kind of couple of better versions graphically, at least, because they did a 32X one that looked a bit better, but
Yeah, I
then
had
they
that
did
one for a while.
The Sega Saturn one though. That's a
The
very good
Saturn. Yeah,
version.
yeah.
Yeah, really good version of
Yeah,
Mortal Kombat
the
2.
Saturn and the MS-DOS were the best actual arcade conversions for it got graphically and the audio and all that. And the Super Nintendo one was amazing. It was an amazing conversion too. Like that's the one I played the most of with the mates at a friend's house. Another friend had the Genesis one. I used to play it there. Later on, I had the 32X version, so I played a hell of a lot of versions of this game and saw the best and worst of each of them.
Still love that Genesis version though, or Mega Drive for those of us in my part of the world.
Yeah,
For all its limitations, I still had an absolute great time playing it, and it was
still a
just
good
an
time.
absolute thrill. It was just a thrill for me to actually own a Mortal Kombat game because I didn't own the first game. I'd only
Mm-hmm.
rented it and I only played it in other people's
Oh,
houses and then a wee bit in the
I've still
arcade.
got
So to
my
have your
original
own Mortal
Genesis
Kombat,
Mortal Kombat one. It's out the
yeah,
back.
great.
I
I
might have
still
to
have
dig
my
it out.
yeah.
Can't hold it up and
I
show you some bitches.
Yeah, I must dig out my old Mega Drive cartridge. I don't have the box. It's weird. I always seem to lose boxes, but never the
Yeah,
cartridges. I wonder why I was always taking
yeah. I've
my
still got the
cartridges
box on
out of their
mine.
boxes. Good old cartridges though, they could survive a nuclear war. You didn't need the
They
box.
could. They're like cockroaches. They'll survive beyond us. We'll be gone, but the cartridges will still be going.
Build
So we're
houses
going to
out of them.
go on. In the next part of our presentation, we're getting to the Mortal Kombat movie. The first movie, I should say, because there's been several movies at this point. Some good, some not so good. All of them debatable. But before we get to the movie, we're going to do a little intermission, take a little break, and then come back.
Right back, folks.
There's an intermission just there. So,
You're
okay,
revitalized.
we're back.
The
Talking about the
movie.
first live action movie from director Paul W.S. Anderson, not to be confused with P.T. Anderson or Wes Anderson.
Yeah, did you mention on our last episode, Johnny? Did you got to see this in the cinema at the time? Did you?
Oh yeah, I did. I not only got to see it in the cinema, like okay, this was in the era where I was going to the cinema every week for about 5 years, and the movies cost $5. And it might sound like I'm making up, but movies used to cost five goddamn. I saw Jurassic Park, and in 1994 it cost me $5, or maybe it was 5.50 then. Mortal Kombat cost me five fucking New Zealand dollars. And I used to go every week to a movie, and I used to have my ticket stubs sitting in a pile where there was like 52 ticket stubs for an entire year. I'd been to see something every week for an entire year. I went for several years. This was in that period. I saw Mortal Kombat. I saw Jurassic Park. I saw just everything that was out back then. And I remember seeing quite vividly the teaser trailer, like I don't know, 6 or 12 months beforehand, however many months it was, and it came on and it had that like techno music, like test your mind, do Mortal Kombat, boo 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 boo, like, just yelling out the names, and it was like Mortal Kombat with the lightning bolt, and it showed the dragon. And in some of the modern documentaries, they were like, I don't know how we felt about that teaser trailer. It seemed a bit rubbish. We sort of got a real trailer, and in the test footage, where they sat the audience, and they saw like a younger audience watching this test trailer, like they said the names of the characters. That's all the guys. That's the guys. And like that's when they knew they were onto something, or like people wanted to see this fucking movie. But yeah, I love seeing this. I still enjoy this movie to this day. I've watched it probably 5 or 10 times. It's not the best movie in the world, man. It's very average. It's very much of its time. But I had a hell of a time watching this in the cinema.
Yeah. I was I wasn't lucky enough to catch it in the cinema at the time. I watched it about a year
I can't
later
forgive you now,
on
Mark.
video. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Well, you're going to be even more unforgiving of the
I'm
fact
gonna have
that
some
at the time
fatality
when
there right now.
yeah, you're not going to be happy probably to learn that at the time when I first watched this, I didn't think it was that good at all. It just didn't really hit with me. It wasn't till once again, as I often say, it wasn't until I kind of reached adulthood that when I went back and rewatched it that I could appreciate it. And it's one of those movies where I could definitely understand how someone watching it today who hasn't seen it before would look at some of the effects,
What are
especially
you
in
talking about?
particular some of that kind of mid 90s experimental CGI did not age well.
Oh, the CG
However,
was not good even back then
no,
for this movie.
no, the CG
It's not
CG was
good.
not good. I will say though, as an actual production in terms of set and setting and location shooting and just kind of like a big budget look and feel of a movie, when you go back and watch it now, it actually looks really good. Especially
It
now that
does.
we've gotten used to kind of seeing very generic looking kind of by the numbers movies. To go back and
It
actually
definitely has a
watch
style and
something like
feel
this.
to it. Hmm.
Oh, definitely. It changes up location a lot. It almost mimics the games in the sense that you've got lots of kind of different environments thrown at you
Yeah.
all in the one movie. So if you can
And
get
there's a few
past the
fourth wall things like the Johnny Cage in the middle of the screen. He fights a bunch of generic goons in suits, which is like a Jean-Claude Van Damme or Jackie Chan movie of the 80s. And there's a reflection in his sunglasses of the guys he's fighting. That's just a very nod and a wink to sort of cheesy 80s action movies.
definitely. But no, look, like I said, if you can once you get past the some of the dodgy CG, you've actually got really like a pretty fun and a pretty great looking movie. And it is a fun movie. Like I said, I think at the time I was probably taking things a bit too seriously as a kid when I watched it. So it because it didn't, because it wasn't an exact representation of what I thought like Mortal Kombat was or whatever, I was probably getting a little bit pissy with it. But I can go
Why
back
isn't
and look at
everybody
these
dead?
things now. Yeah. But no,
Good cast,
it's
too.
really fun. It's really fun. And it was a smash hit too. Like it made money. Big time money.
Yeah, it made like something like 5 or 10 times its budget. Like it was made for under 50 million and made something like over 100 million.
And Paul Anderson, I'm sure he's very happy with it because it kind of helped. push him right along into that kind of, he's just got
He's
so
kind
many
of
jobs.
ageless. If you look at him, he looks like he hasn't aged a goddamn day since back then.
Yeah, oh, definitely. He has to be delighted with how this turned out because like it pretty
Then
much
he made all his
pushed his
goddamn
career
Resident Evil
forward.
money, so that money he made was made off this one.
Yeah, he made a bit off Alien versus Predator as well, I'd say.
Oh,
Fucker.
don't even mention that over here. I can tolerate those Resident Evil movies on a day where I'm really bored and I've got no other Z grade movies to watch, but I don't want to watch those bloody Alien Predator movies anytime again soon.
Event Horizon is probably my favorite of his
Oh,
movies
it's
that I've
by
seen.
far, by far. It's weird. There's certain directors like a bloody what's his name, Anderson, or even old Zack Snyder. The early films I quite enjoy, and then the longer they go on, I'm like, what happened? What happened? You had talent and promise, and now you were just making studio bullshit.
That's it though. It's the studio putting the reins on guys and
Yeah,
them being given direct instruction as the look, this is what we want. You are the director, but
yeah,
we're actually going to direct you and you're just going to do what we
yeah,
tell you.
pretty much. I think you got it there because, like, some of those directors they were young and hungry, and they were rock and roll and anti-establishment, and at some point they become the establishment. They're like, "What are you doing, man? I don't want to watch your stupid films no more."
You have a favorite fight moment in the Mortal Kombat movie or just a favorite like
Oh,
scene or
I probably do. I probably. I'm not sure if I have a favorite. Like, it's a very stylistic thing. Like, I do like cinematically. It has good production values and location shooting. It's the fights are fairly generic. If you want to get into the nitty gritty of like good action cinema, like your 70s, 80s Hong Kong, American, your cowboy movies, your kung fu, it's very generic, but it manages to be faithful to the Mortal Kombat lore and characters. And I think the cast do a fairly good job in this film. Like the little moments, Johnny Cage taking off his sunglasses here in the boat, and then in the next bit, he's got all these ridiculous suitcases and falls into the water and gets himself all wet. There's little bits that make you laugh, and I think it kind of humanizes the characters. And they're going back to that Jean Claude Van Damme sort of archetype here too, where he's just a fucking Hollywood douchebag, and they're showing him on screen. He's not terribly likable, but it is funny, and you want to kind of have a joke and make fun of him. But then later on, he's going to have some serious fights. I don't know if I have a favorite in the movie. It's a tough call. Like, oh, because the fights are so generic. Like they're shot really well, and the locations are great, and the suits and costumes are good, but the choreography is sort of average. I guess it comes down to who's your favorite character. Do you like Cage? Do you like Goro? Do you like Sub Zero or Scorpion? I'm going to have to
yeah.
decide as we go through what's actually my favorite one.
You are right though in what you say. Like there, a lot of the fights are quite generic. I think that, and kind of
They're
going
not
back to
bad.
what we
They're
were
just
talking
like
about,
because they're sort of hyphenated. They're shortened down to the cliff notes, and then we move on to each scene as we go.
it does come back a little bit though to that CG we were talking about. It kind of for some of the fights, especially with Scorpion and that when they try and do the effect of the rope palm thing or whatever, the hook thing, it just looks kind of bad, and then it kind of takes you out of the actual fight scene. It just kind of immediately, yeah, there we go, yeah. And in that still, it actually looks okay, but when you
Why
see it
was it
on
alive?
screen,
Why was it a weird little insect that just takes you out of the movie? Like, what is going on?
yeah, it's very hard to kind of get suspend your disbelief in such a way, and it's so like in that still, it actually looks okay. When you see it on screen, it's probably one of the most cartoonish looking,
It's very
fakest
strange.
looking thing. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
very
it's
strange.
bizarre.
I will say, like, the scorpion thing is strange, the reptile thing is strange. Sub Zero looked okay when he was getting frozen and his freeze effects. Raiden at the start of the movie is they have a lightning effect in his eyes. It just looks like he's having a seizure or something. But at the end of the movie, they somehow have a better effect where it actually looks like lightning on the I mean, you can do this now and any kind of program in 2 seconds, just drop a lightning image on top of old Christopher Lambert. But the second half of the movie somehow improves on some effects, but other effects look just as bad, if not worse, than the beginning. So it's a little inconsistent, but it's going back to that era of the old PC CD-ROM and PlayStation 1 N64 and your Silicon graphics and your Stan Winston Studios. It was that transitional era where we had good effects that were practical, and we had early days of CG stuff that didn't look quite right, and sometimes they get away with it, and sometimes it's not good. So the top right of
Yeah,
the screen there, check out Raiden's eyes. Like, why is it? They look terrible. He's got pink eye.
it's like something out of Ghostbusters.
Yeah, it does. It's Gozer. And the weird reptile that like comes out of, he's just like a weird CG creature, and then goes into the statue and comes alive as a ninja man later in the film. That was very weird and jarring watching the film.
Yeah, definitely taking a few liberties
Yeah,
with abilities and what can happen there.
but the island and like I think they filmed some of the early stuff in Thailand. Then you've got models and miniatures for the island, and there's a whole lot of dribbly candles going on as they walk through different areas. But some of the statues, the island, that stuff is just really cool production design. That like works well and kind of sets the scene. That's a grim, weird place, and it makes you think of old like Harryhausen films where ancient warriors have been turned to stone by Medusa. Is kind of what they're going for with these different warriors of different areas here.
Yeah, it's a really really cool looking setting, and they did do justice in that respect. Like I was saying, like you could tell there was definitely a decent amount of on location shooting and big sets construction for this movie. And I'll keep going back to the dodgy CGI, but when you can look past all of that and just look at the actual environment that the action is taking place in, and the setup, like a lot of the stuff around the island especially does look really good
Yeah,
and big budget, and makes you feel like you're in a place as opposed to just watching people in front of like a green screen doing
yeah.
choreography.
Like good production design, good background and set construction. And then, I mean, on the left there, Shang Tsung does the soul suck thing to the Jamaican looking dude after he has that fight with Liu Kang. And that's like really dodgy CGI again. And again, with the Scorpion doing his weird living harpoons thing. So it's a strange contrast and very much of its era. Goro up the top and top right. He was one of the last great animatronic slash puppet slash latex things. And this is very much, I don't know who built that puppet. Like a lot of stuff from the 80s, 90s, I can tell you who built that puppet and fucking when. If it's Stan Winston Studios doing Predator, or whoever doing Alien, or Jim Henson Workshop doing Labyrinth and Ninja Turtles. I don't know who the hell built that Goro puppet, but it's notable as being one of the last great animatronic slash puppet things of practical effects. He's entirely practical. There's no computer graphics for Goro whatsoever, and he's a little weird looking on screen, but he does actually match the proportions of the old stop motion miniature quite well. Where he's got this bizarre torso, the extra arms. He is a practical effect that for me it works. For some people, it's probably a bit cheesy and a bit odd, but I really liked how they made him move about and work. He's very limited because he's basically one guy on top of another guy with extra arms walking about. It's like having a puppet on stilts. But for me, it worked in the film. But you've got this guy, you've got weird CGI stuff, and then you've got production design background stuff, and it's a strange melange combination of a film.
Yeah, and it's well, look, I would agree with you in terms of how Goro looks, and when you go back and watch the film, especially these days, he does stand out as being one of the successes in terms of special effects and how he actually looks on screen. So I definitely give them the win there. I think though, as you kind of touched on, it's kind of really the year that this movie was being made. You've got all these. You've got, like you said, you've got your a bit of stop motion puppetry. You've got CGI. You've got live action. You've got these kind of practical and digital effects coming together at a time when they hadn't just kind of mastered that transition of how to mix them together so they would be more seamless. So it can be a bit jarring sometimes when you're watching something on screen where you can identify, okay, like 80% of what I'm looking at is there, but now there's a quite obvious blob of
Yeah,
about 20% of stuff I'm seeing that shouldn't be there or that doesn't look like it
yeah,
belongs in the picture. And at the times when you do kind of nitpick this movie for how it looks, I think that's what's happening. It's kind of
yeah,
different types of effects and, movie making techniques coming together at a time before they'd been, because when you see things like Jurassic Park and things where they've really mastered mixing a practical effect with a CGI model and they kind of nail it. Whereas here it's like they're struggling a little bit sometimes to bridge that gap
sure.
between a seamless transition.
Yeah, and like here, so this part of the movie we go from we see Kano having his little chicken McFeast, Goro is introduced, Liu Kang has a fight with a Jamaican looking fella, and then we go into a Sonya Kano fight. We see we see Johnny Cage fighting Scorpion, and I don't know. It's kind of a tie for favorite fights. I don't know. It's probably going to come down to one of these two, either the Sonya Kano or Johnny Cage Scorpion, both of which are not great but enjoyable. Like the dude who plays Kano's looking fairly buff.
Yeah.
The
He was in the
Sonya's just
gym.
looking, yeah, he's at the gym. Sonya's looking sexy as hell in this fight. And a little bit of fun trivia here. That knife he has there, you can get prop replicas apparently for quite a few years and up to now on eBay for a reasonable price. And they're big Rambo sized knives that are quite deadly and horrible. Another fun
Perfect
bit of
for home defense.
trivia is old the actress who plays Sonya here. To people who are fans of old Happy Gilmore and um, Billy Madison, she also appears in Billy Madison as the school teacher slash love interest in that movie. And there's the scene during the Billy Madison movie where Mortal Kombat being zeitgeist on the home conversions, one of the kids goes, "Mortal Kombat's like the greatest game ever on Sega Genesis," and Billy Madison's like, "It's like, no, he's not. Donkey Kong is the greatest game ever." It's like, "Shut up!" and like, "You suck. No, you suck."
This fight's pretty good for a bit of character building as well, because there's lots of just kind of
Mm.
quips and dialogue mixed in. It's not just a kind of a straight, let's go in and
It's
kind of fight type scene.
it's a very short fight, and it's implied that Sonya she does do kind of like leg scissor kick and snaps his neck, and he doesn't appear later on in the film, so it's assumed he's actually dead, which is kind of like, okay, why did she kill him instead of knocking him out? So it's a little strange and jarring, but it's implied that Kano's actually dead in the scene from that neck snap. But in terms of like just the way it's shot, you've got they're on a beach on a island slash I don't know. I assume it's somewhere in like Indonesia or whatever. I don't know, but the production shoot it looks very nice. It's shot well, good lighting. Um, the actual fight is it's fairly basic, but as far as what works on screen, it's pretty good. Whereas like the Johnny Cage one, Scorpion, I quite enjoy, but it kind of jumps about all over the place. There's a lot of snappy cuts and edits. Whereas this one, you get more of a long shot, like a 70s, um, like you're watching a Jimbo or something like that, where you can actually just see what the hell's going on without giving you a bloody like manic effect of too many edits. But yeah, then it goes into we get the Katana and Liu Kang. It's meant to be a fight, but she's kind of like telling him, whispering a little secrets in his ear about what's really going on behind the scenes. We get the Liu Kang's Sub-Zero fight, which leads into the Goro Johnny Cage one. So what do you like out of this part of the film, mate?
Well, I like the look of everything. I do kind of now the dialogue in the film. It's not terrible. It's not fantastic
It's not the best.
either. No, it's definitely it serves the purpose of, I suppose, driving the plot forward.
Yeah,
It is though, even just looking though at these stills, it's hard to ignore just how impressive though a lot of the settings are here. And it's
I like
something
the
that
Liu Kang, the
maybe,
meditation, and then the island, which I think again is like
yeah,
around Thailand or Indonesia.
and it's a classic, it's a kind of classic hero type of deal to do
Yeah.
a little setup like that. No, it's one thing that's kind of noticeable about this movie as well, though, when you would compare it against something more modern, is you can kind of actually see where the money was spent. Like you can tell that there
Mhm.
was, even though like it's not like the most biggest budget ever, but it's still they put a lot into it, and it definitely shows on screen with the
There's a lot
sets
of weird
and the overall
statues in the
setting.
background.
Yeah, he was. I wonder is it like an Anderson call to make the island so candle heavy? Because you did mention earlier, like it's like
The
every
dribbly
area.
candles, man. There's some Discworld dribbly candles going on.
Yeah. But like so many areas they go to, they're always just there. Like unless they're like in the forest or whatever, but like
Who the
they're
hell is
just like
lighting
it's
all
like
those candles before they get there?
yeah. Some dude, some poor dude is like just his entire job is to go
Some
around
extra
and
just
like
spent
put
his
a yeah.
entire budget lighting candles.
I wonder like I obviously like the girl who or the lady who plays Sonya, I can't remember her name, but like I know like she is an actual actress and has appeared and stuff and that. I wonder what the
Bridget
level
Wilson,
of do you know
who
anything about
married.
like the level of training for any of these guys? Like, was it all
Well,
stunt doubles or was?
they went and did a fair amount of actual like training for like I don't know the exact level of time. I want to say like a month or two. Bridget Wilson went on to marry tennis legend Peter Sampras, who also had a Mega Drive video game, 4 players. Um, but I quite like her as Sonya in this. There's really, if you look at all the different Mortal Kombat Sonyas, there's no bad Sonya in all the different games and live action. And well, I mean, maybe the second movie not so good. Not blaming the actress, but um, no, she did a good job in that, and in Billy Madison. She's enjoyable to watch. And I was having a bit of read today, like saying, you know, Hollywood's often not nice to female actresses because they get treated as like objects rather than actual human beings, and kind of some people retire on purpose just to go off and do things. So she married Peter Sampras, the tennis legend. They went off and had a good happy ending with children and lived happily ever after. Both of them retired from professional slash media life on purpose and wanted to be away from media and spotlight. So good on them for actually having a good life together. I really enjoyed seeing her in the film. Her and the other actors in this film did do some practical like martial arts training specifically for the film. Some other guys like Lyndon Ashby, he'd done some stuff back earlier. Kung Fu, the legend continues with old David Carradine, continuing on from that 70s show. He was in that show. He'd done some stuff in that, but I don't know how much was martial arts and how much was more kind of dance choreography training. They did a reasonable amount of training for this film to get physically in shape and just to do some on-screen kicks and movements and this and that.
Yeah, no, they did an admirable job. I'm assuming there was all sorts of stand-in martial arts guys though just hanging around just to get some stuff.
I assume
I'm
so.
sure some stuff was just a little bit too complicated just to learn in a couple of days or whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a train spotting film where if you're going to go and look at the digital file and go frame by frame, it's like watching old episodes of Buffy or Angel where you can kind of you can pick little scenes where it's the actor and then it swaps out to the stunt guy or it's behind their head and all that sort of thing, and then they're back in again. But they did a reasonable amount of stuff themselves on screen, like an impressive amount, I think, for the era in the film. Just a couple of close ups here of the old Scorpion, Reptile, Sub Zero, Raiden, because they were just like some of the best still shots in the film, because there's a lot of motion in this film, and where you get motion, you have motion blur, and you can't see if you want to still show what the hell's going on. So there's a little out of order, but I chucked them in there just to get a good look at them. Scorpion has the weird living harpoon thing. I do like that his eyes have kind of have that glossy, milky look. It's cool.
Yes.
Reptile looks a bit lame. He's just the dude in green and the weird mask. Sub-Zero from the bit where he gets frozen is a digital effect, but it's cheesy, but it looks reasonably cool. And Raiden with the electric eyes is fun. And I still laugh at old
Good electric eyes this time.
Yes. Christopher Lambert, the Highlander, the French guy playing the guy who's meant to be like an Asian martial arts god hero character, always just makes me laugh.
I'm sure it was a sweet payday for him.
Yeah, and just a nice, good still frame here. This was leading up to the Johnny Cage fight with Goro. He fights another dude and just emasculates him and just destroys this guy, where he's with his other, not even using two of his forearms, and basically kills him. And it leads up to Johnny Cage fighting Goro, who he does that nut punch, which he looked back down the bottom here. Goro's got those eyes. That's when he's getting punched in the nuts. And I put in a little graphic there, which is actually from Mortal Kombat 2 for people paying attention. There's some nuts there just for fun.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, you gotta do it. It leads us up to it. And that is actually the most direct thing linking back to Bloodsport and Jean-Claude Van Damme, is that they do what the old nut punch. And then it leads on to the final part of the film where Shang Tsung is like, well, stuff you guys, I'm going home. I'm off to Outworld. You've stuffed up my tournament. It didn't go as a planned. I'm grabbing Sonya, which is slightly annoying because there's shown her as a competent fighter, and now she's back to being like, I'm the princess. I'm getting spirited away so the male heroes can come and grab. It's just slightly annoying on that level, but I don't know. They had to do something, I guess, for the final act of the film where it goes to the portal and they're off to Outworld, which was meant to kind of lead into a sequel that never happened. They did make a sequel, but it wasn't the sequel to this film. It was a studio bullshit one with other actors.
Yeah, nobody comes back for the sequel. Am I right in saying that? It's been so long since I've
pretty much nobody.
watched it. Is it
You
like
get that
James Raymar as Raiden?
Guy as Shao Kahn, and
Yeah, it's I can hardly remember a thing about the sequel other than I didn't enjoy it.
If you're talking about dodgy digital effects, man, they just go balls to the wall with bad digital effects. In that second Mortal Kombat Armageddon, you get the guy who's always shivering people in the neck in the X-Files, who's like some kind of weird alien clone thing. If you follow the X-Files, I can never remember. But he's a very short guy that they always film with the camera tilted up. He plays Shao Kahn in that second film, and it's nothing against that dude, but that second film is just it's terrible. Like the actors are all swapped out, and if we had had the same director, old Anderson, pre-Resident Evil, I remind you, when he was sort of more ambitious, and if we had this cast come back, I would have loved to have seen a second film with this cast, Paul W.S. Anderson, and chucking in a couple other characters. That's something what I've loved to have seen rather than what we actually got. And what we should have got, but instead we got a stupid studio movie that had nothing to do with the first one.
Did it even make theatrical release? Or was that straight to video, the second one?
I genuinely don't know. I think it went to the cinema in some places in the world, but I'll have to bloody well look it up this week. But
it seems so unworthy.
I remember when they ended this film, I was thinking, oh, great, next year or the year after, we'll get another one, like Jurassic Park, the next movie, Mortal Kombat, the next movie, or next Rambo, even if it's not the best sequel. Well, no, completely different cast, completely different director, terrible effects. That just, you can tell they just rushed it, and just terrible quality all the way. So, but back then I was looking forward to seeing a second one of this so much. I was like, oh yeah, count me in, I'll see another one. But no, it's fucking bullshit.
first one though, I know we mentioned earlier, it made plenty of money, but I imagine it was the type of thing that was critically panned. And I haven't even
It
read if it
was.
was or not, but
It was. If
I'm
you
just
read
had a guess.
Wikipedia or anything, it will literally say it was critically panned but popular with fans in the audience who actually bought the damn tickets.
I think that sometimes throws studios in the loop because they don't know,
Yeah,
do we take the high road and just go and make more money, or do we move on to other
yeah.
things?
I don't know the actual reason. I assume it came down to timing or what. I mean, this was New Line, the old bloody Friday the 13th House of Horror built, so which usually did indie stuff and would go on and crank out a sequel. I don't know the reasons why they didn't do a proper sequel and end up doing a nonsense one, but I don't know. I'd like to find out, I guess, but it's one. I reckon it comes down to some kind of timing or deals or who was doing what and when more than the money, because the money would definitely would have been there for the actual film. So the end of this cinematic masterpiece, not. We get old Shang Tsung spiriting off out with Sonya, Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, and all the rest of the goons follow them. We get a bizarre whole bunch of statues and weird stuff leading up this alleyway and outworld, which look pretty cool. Kind of reminds me of the first episode of Transformers, where Soundwave stands there as that like T statue, actually. But production design, it looks pretty cool. Whole lot of extra. The candles have gone, but now I've got a bunch of flaming torches all over the place. Liu Kang fights Reptile, who's the CG creature from earlier. He climbs into a statue, and the statue comes alive, which is like 9, 10 feet tall, but he turns into a 6 foot reptile man, and it makes no goddamn sense. I remember in the cinema back there watching it, going, "What the fuck is going on? Why is Reptile a animated man turning into a statue?" Then back to him, and then Liu Kang beats him, and he turns into a whole pile of like worms and stuff, and it's really quite strange, and you forget about it. Then we get to the end scene. He fights Shang Tsung. Shang Tsung starts losing the fight, conjures up a whole bunch of like warriors out of the floor who are like from different ages, like 100/2000 years ago ages, presumably linked to his ability to suck the souls out of people. But how he can conjure up the warriors, I don't know. Liu Kang managed to fight through all that, fight Shang Tsung. Shang Tsung morphs into his brother, whatever, from the beginning of the film, whose soul is stolen. And Liu Kang gets through all that, sees through his deception, not unlike Mortal Kombat deception. The other characters have sneaked in there as the monk robes. You can see Johnny Cage and Katana. And Liu Kang manages to knock Liu Kang onto the floor, which has the big Mortal Kombat dragon. And for no particular reason, a whole bunch of spikes coming up, referencing the first game in the pit stage, which is like very video gamey. Like we've got the dragon.
That's
and then
the only
spikes.
reason. It's the only reason those
The
spikes
only
are there.
reason, because the spikes weren't there when they came in there.
Yeah, quite the finale and quite the ending, a bitter end for the villain, but fitting for the subject matter that is Mortal
He's a
Kombat
bit
for it
of
to
a
end
bastard.
like that. Oh, big time, yeah. He was good
It's
though as a character in this. I thought he actually
and
came
the actor was
across
good too.
well. Yeah, fair play, definitely. He did a good job.
Yeah, I didn't know until this week. I was looking up stuff about the history of Mortal Kombat, like games, behind the scenes, production, yada yada yada. I mean, I played a hell of a lot of the different games back then, but there's all kinds of production materials since then have come out behind the scenes. And watched a few documentaries that are worth checking out. Insert Coin, made by one of the guys who used to work at Midway back then, definitely the number one. A few good ones on YouTube, made by fans that are reasonable. And then looking up stuff this week. Mortal Kombat 11, they've added in a whole bunch of cool skins. I have not played the game. I'll buy it at some point. They've a whole bunch of skins based on, you've got Raiden from this movie, the guy that played Shang Tsung, and they've added in the JCVD skin, and they've added in Sonya, who's Bridget Wilson, as well as their voice. They're all extra skins you can get in the game, which I thought was pretty cool nod back to this film for a film that's like going way back to the beginning of the series. And I had no idea they'd done that until I was looking up stuff this week.
No, it is pretty cool that they did that, and it's one of those
Hmm.
things like it might not be everybody's favorite kind of piece of Mortal
Not
Kombat
my
media,
cup of
but
tea.
it does still have a significant following, and there's probably a decent amount of
Yeah,
people whose like there's probably people realistically whose introduction to Mortal Kombat was the movie. You're going to find that there was people
yeah.
like that. It's pretty cool that they are paying
Well, it was
tribute
PG
to it in
13
that respect. Yeah, yeah. Easy access for everybody. Fun for all the family.
for all the family's fatalities.
Family fatalities, formalities.
People that like murder and carnage and combat and martial arts tournament. It does have a very for a movie that's based on Mortal Kombat, this like crazy over the top violent video game where they're like midway from number one to number two, they're like, "Oh, you want some controversy? Here's some flipping some double birds for you for number two. We're gonna extra fatalities and more crazy shit. We don't care about your controversy. It's more free advertising and media for us." This movie ends with like Shang Tsung gets impaled on the spikes, and then the next scene it's like there's a whole bunch of people running down the pathway, and then we're like, "Yay!" smiling like the end of the A Team or MacGyver or something.
It's great.
It's
I,
kind
I
of
love stuff
jarring.
like that. Yeah, it's so funny though. And at least it's not like the live action Street Fighter movie where they do a freeze frame.
Oh, freeze frame. That would be the ultimate thing. Because you get the we're all team, we're together. We've got Raiden, Sonya, Johnny Cage, Liu Kang, Katana. And then you get the lightning bolts next to the mountain and a terrible computer. Actually, I don't know whether the computer face or practical effects, but some kind of composite overlay of Shao Kahn's face appears in the clouds. And Shao Kahn's like, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to do some stuff that's unintelligible. And Raiden's like, I don't think so at the end of the movie. And then it goes into the credits. And it's just there as a teaser leading into a sequel that they didn't make. And then there was a gap and they made a horrible sequel that was unrelated and didn't really technically it follows on with the characters, but when you watch it, it's a complete nonsense movie that's it's worth watching just to laugh at how awful it is, but otherwise it's got no value.
Yeah, it's pretty trash.
Yeah, and it leaps into the credits, directed by Paul Anderson, who he was just regular Paul Anderson before he became Paul W. yes, Anderson. Poor people confused him with the other Andersons around. And the producer is fairly significant, where it says produced by Lawrence Kasanoff, because he was the guy who, when he was talking to the Midway Games guys who built the video games, he was the guy that actually suggested to do a film in the first place, not unlike the old Ninja Turtles line where you had a guy come in and be like, hey, we should take this indie comic and turn it into a toy line and do something with it. Without that guy, this film wouldn't have existed, basically.
And well done, Lawrence Kazanov, for giving us
Yeah,
this. Glad he had his
yeah.
input.
Actually, doing something useful, not being one of those producers who sits at home and just takes a bloody check for doing nothing.
Yeah, thanks for the encouragement.
Thanks for the encouragement. But yeah, he was really one of those guys who was like, actually a good producer slash salesman who's like, hey, you've got this great property. What about if we do this? And then they got a shitload of money from doing it. So they'd probably be pretty happy with this as suggestions. Which brings us then to the end of our slideshow slash Mortal Kombat time.
It's the end of the slideshow, but is it the end of Mortal Kombat? No,
No
there's
way, man.
loads
They're
of
up to
Mortal
Mortal Kombat
Kombat out
11
there.
now. They're
Yeah,
up to number 11. Plus, they've
yeah,
got
it
another
will never
sequel
end.
coming to that reboot movie they did that wasn't great. That they're not apparently another movie's coming, but
There's plenty of MK content out there to satisfy your
yeah,
souls. You'll have such a
Yeah,
satisfied soul that Shang Tsung won't dare try to extract it.
he won't dare. Up, down, up, low kick. That was his thing in Mortal Kombat 2 to steal the old soul. Um,
I always loved
but yeah, no,
the multiple fireballs. That was my favorite. Just keep them going, a big chain of them.
yeah, Boba Hicks, balls of fire. That's what you're gonna get here. And, but yeah, I did unreasonably enjoy this film for what it was back then, and not in a nostalgic way. I mean, like when I was actually in the cinema, I enjoyed the hell out of it, and I knew it was just not great. Every little flaw and weird thing that was different than the video game, I'm like, why the hell is it like this, and why is it like? But I just got swept up in that bloody techno soundtrack, and they're like yelling shitted and doing karate kicks and roundhouses and soul sucks and pit fatality. There was enough in there that I just got swept up in it. Just went along and enjoyed it.
Soundtrack is so good. Those techno beats are awesome.
Yeah,
And look,
yeah.
like I
There's
was saying earlier, I wasn't overly chuffed with it the first time around, but each time I've gone back to it, I can take a little bit more good from it each time. And when it comes to video game movie tie-ins, I mean, there's so many
It's still
examples.
the only one I actually enjoy of all video game related movies. It's the one I can go, I can watch this and enjoy it. It's B grade, but other stuff I'm like,
It's a bit B grade, yeah, but it's fairly it sticks fairly closely to its source material. It's not like,
yeah, that's the thing.
Resident Evil and
Surprisingly
other
so.
stuff.
And it
You know,
works within its PG 13 format. Like the characters are fairly true to those first two games. And I don't know, it's surprisingly enjoyable for just a B grade film by a hungry young British director with a techno soundtrack and some people doing pantomime slash martial arts stuff. Turned out all right, but not the sequel. Sequel was
not
not
the
good.
sequel. Well, look, it will always be a debate among gaming fans as to which fighting game was better when it comes to Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. But I think when it comes to live action movies, Mortal Kombat blows the Street Fighter movie
Yeah,
out of the water, like
definitely for live
completely.
action movies. If you're talking video games, Street Fighter 2 was awesome. Turbo slash Hyper for me was my favorite of the series. I like Street Fighter Zero 3 a lot, but my personal favorite is still King of Fighters 98. King of Fighters 98 or the first two Mortal Kombat games. I can play those any day.
Those are your fighting jams. Yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
I'm a Street
There's
Fighter.
there's
I'm a
later
Super
games
Street
that are
Fighter
technically
2.
better, but those are my favorites.
Yeah, my favorites were probably Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo and Mortal Kombat 2 will always probably be
Mhm.
my favorite 2D fighting games.
Yeah. It's just like there's points where they're complicated enough, there's depth to them, but they didn't get super over the top complicated like later games from the same companies.
Just right. Just got it right.
Yeah, that's so. Well, I think we'll wind up there and in the show for today, and I'll just throw in a combat time for all you fans that like that terrible animated show in the '90s, which is like one of you, probably me, watching this video next week.
Yeah, go outside, folks, and snip some flowers and enjoy life. Because I know you've after just been watching the stream and it's contained lots of talk of explicit violence and gore. So go outside, do something nice, be peaceful, and live non-violent, productive lives.
Do all those things, and then suck some souls and get your hell revenants going. Burn some skeletons alive. That's Mortal Kombat style, and do a couple of friendships while you're at it. Okay, we'll
Yeah.
catch you next time, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye, guys.